I'm not used to any of the assets that I'm used to using, so sorry for the abruptness. But we're here. Hello, humans. I am Dan from the internet. And this is a special thing that I've been wanting to do. Both of us have been wanting to do. Of course, we're streaming on Rayyvana's channel. I am joined by Rayyvana, who will be on screen right now. How was that for an actual intro? And yeah, Severance is a show that exists on Apple TV. Noted Apple hater and Android enjoyer Dan from the internet here, but secret iPhone enjoyer Dan from the internet here has been, really. Shout out to Aurora, one of my good friends, who pilled me onto the show. Actually, this time last year in February, when the first season had already come out. Now the second season is out, and Ray and I were talking before the show. Of course, Rayyvana can be found on twitch.tv/Rayyvana with the Y's that you see on screen. Y's. And frequently a guest on Power Report, the political show that I do on Thursdays and other days. Both of us were like, yeah, finally we get to talk about this show, which has a lot of real like meat in it, because there's political stuff, there's a lot of stuff about like work, but it's also just like, politics is a lot. In doing this on the audio face feed, where my friend Sean and I would generally do stuff about like music, news, and culture and stuff. But even music has become a lot over the past couple of weeks, or past couple of years rather. So we've taken a little bit of a hiatus from that. But this felt like a really good time to like jump into this really fun film. So Ray, thank you for joining. Thank you for being here, rather.
Of course.
And I'm so excited to do this.
Yeah, let's just start. You mentioned that this is an Apple TV show, which is ironic because the show itself is a critique of late stage capitalism. The idea of this mega corporation, this conglomerate. Obviously, in the show, the criticism is towards this fictitious company called Lumen, which produces everything we learned in the season, from doors to medical equipment. And pretty much everything in between. And it's also
self-defense flashcards.
It's like if Scientology also...
By the way, blanket spoiler alert for the entire series.
Right.
Let's just do that right now. In case you didn't know how Rewatch Podcast works, this is the show where we're talking about the show we watched. And so therefore, there will be spoilers. Sorry.
There will be spoilers.
It's like a season 1 spoiler, so hashtag suck it. But anyways, yes, Lumen Industries is indeed an industry.
It is
they have a lot of industries, yes.
Yeah, it's like
one of those big conglomerates that definitely, like you were saying, touches on late stage capitalism.
Yeah, it's like, think about if Scientology also made everything that you consume, and it had like a legitimate business front and people somewhat trusted it, but while also leveraging the same amount of political power that it does have. We do get to see that a lot at the end of season 1, where they're trying to sell their state senators on a certain bill. It's set in a fictitious sort of universe. We don't know what state it is.
I will say it is the United States of America.
Yeah.
But it's a fictitious state and a fictitious city. So it's definitely like an alternate reality.
Right.
The state is, I think I've seen a lot of fan theories that's kind of like Pennsylvania in a way, and it makes sense. It's sort of like snowy, but it's definitely kind of like, the actual office they use is the one of the former International Business Machines, IBM offices in New Jersey, I believe. And it's just like this really kind of beautiful, but also, as you see in the show, kind of haunting, brutalist modern structure. And but yeah, like you were saying, it is set in a version of maybe like I described it to my friend as like a Meet the Robinsons dystopia, like the Incredibles dystopia, where it's like sort of 70s, the idea of 70s retrofuturism. But because like everyone, I know this is a car guy, and you definitely see this in the episode, as Audi I'm really bad with names, but like the main character.
Mark?
Mark, yes. I was gonna call him like Michael Scott. I'm like, that's the author.
Close
like,
enough. S. Mark Scout. Michael Scott. Why not?
Americans, white shows, you get it. But like, when you see the scene where he's driving up to the Lumen offices and he's doing, and of course we're talking about season 2, episode 3, where he's driving up to the Lumen offices and he's counting down the seconds to try to hack his Severance and try to be able to recall any Mark while he's outie Mark by thinking of himself in the car and counting the seconds. But I was thinking, like, while you're in those cars, and kind of like when you're looking at, and we'll play this clip in a moment, but everyone who's driving these cars, these are very like 70s, 80s, like Buick, Saab, Subaru style, like, nondescript things. But like the macro data refinement computers, which I love that they're actually real, and like not just like set pieces, like they're playing like I imagine like all the actors like playing with the thing. But it's a retro futurist thing where everything looks like 1984 Apple computer style environment, which is super ironic because Apple TV makes a show, but also it's very futuristic in the sense that you can definitely tell, oh no, these are people who have smartphones, right?
Right.
People who have like access to modern technology. They're just in Kier world, Kier reality, where maybe you can imagine Kier being a Vanderbilt or an Edison of a former day, and because of his ownership of industry, which is where this gets interestingly political. Sorry for rambling, but like to end here, you can imagine where like Kier is one of those original titans of industry you get that in America we had during the robber baron era of the 1890s and the 1900s, 1910s, etc. And you can imagine an alternate reality where like, oh no, there wasn't multiple robber barons, he was the robber baron, and he had such a reality that he got his own state named after him. And it's not just like a company town like Ford did with Dearborn, Michigan, or Flint, Michigan with General Motors. Even Elon Musk is doing with Starbase, Texas right now. But a company state, company like environment, and this whole political apparatus, which feels very relevant, especially right now, where the company is related to the politics. We're like, oh, the company is messing with people's brains to get them to work harder. But that's okay, though, because they're tied with the politicians that we like.
Mm-hmm.
Such a good show. Oh, my gosh.
It's excellent. And I think the best way, and speaking of the car thing, we'll talk about this character's car in a second. I think the best way to break it down, because we sort of see these vignettes of these different characters' lives, and it's happening chronologically throughout the episode, but I think it's easiest to just pick a character and follow their activity through the episode piece by piece, because in this episode particularly, they're not interacting with each other a ton. So let's start out with Miss Cobell, Miss Selvig, or as Rickon so aptly put it, Miss Cobellvig. Let's start out. She's the first character we see in this episode. So let's just start with this clip and then break it down from there and then go on to the rest of what she does throughout the episode.
I'm so excited to participate in this exercise for how hard Apple TV censors on YouTube. So let's go.
Let's let her rip.
Let her rip. Miss Cobell wakes up. Woken up by like a truck on the side of the road, looking around for the podcast audience.
She was sleeping in her car.
And yeah, it's like this like retro Volvo that she's like wiping the fog off the mirror of the windows. Sorry.
And this part is important when she looks down at the passenger seat. before she continues whatever journey it is that she's on. We don't know.
She puts in her tape cassette, starts driving.
So one thing I want to point out is in this show, there's a lot of they allude a lot to the Matrix, also
Ben Stiller.
and also to
also your camera is frozen. At least on my end. But I can hear
it's
your
not
audio.
frozen on my side too. Oh, okay, it just stopped. I'll start it back up.
No,
but
wait, that just happened.
I will say that what the car that Cobell drives is a white rabbit. There's a ton of references to Alice in Wonderland. Obviously the white rabbit, an important part in Alice in Wonderland. So that's like a direct reference to that, in my opinion. But yeah, so the last we saw Cobell, we weren't sure if she was going to take this new fake job at Lumen after she got fired. And it looks like she didn't.
Yeah, which makes a lot of sense because you see a lot of, Severance is definitely like a workplace thriller. Sounds like an oxymoron, but when you hear when you watch the show, you really kind of get the pieces of it. And one of the pieces is like, oh, you understand a lot of times. I'm going to keep our one of the old audio face rules is #no politics. So like, it's obviously impossible to do, especially with music as we used to do, and also this show. But let's pretend #no politics here is the rule I'm using to allude to the obvious thing. All right. But there are certain work environments and workplaces that I've been in where I've seen people put into a particular role that the title would make you think it's more important than the previous role, but it's actually just like shunting them aside. It's like, okay, let's just like get you out of the way so you get demoralized, and so you like I even hate to use this phrase, but like, the phrase self-deport was a really popular thing during the Biden administration and during the first Trump administration. But this idea that people get so demoralized, the whole process and context of, existing in a particular role in the workplace, they decide I would rather just quit. And so, yeah, people definitely do that.
Right. I mean, and we saw what happened to Miss Cobelvig is that she was betrayed by her underling, Mr. Milchek, who will break down the insane,
which also happens all the time in the corporate space,
right?
Where like, okay, we're gonna, in addition to shunting you into the corner of the company, we're gonna promote your underling, sorry to use the terms, but like we're going to promote that person to take your job because we can pay them less and they're going to be hungrier and they're going to probably do better, or at least approach the job with a different spin that we need right now.
Right. I think we can play the next clip just to talk about her, because she doesn't turn around at this point yet. She continues down the road in her little white rabbit, going God knows where. We don't know how far she is, how far she's traveled, but we know that time has passed since her interaction with Mark when she left her apartment after packing up her car. So, and she obviously didn't stop at a hotel. She's just been driving. Again, where she's going, we don't know. But it's clear that at this point, she did not accept. She either didn't accept the position with Lumen or she did, and they are shipping her off to bumfuck nowhere to do this fake title job, which she was like on the Severance Advisory Committee was essentially what it was. Versus she'd been doing her job as managing the severed floor at this like flagship Lumen building, was really important to whatever their Cold Harbor project is. We still don't know what Cold Harbor is. We'll probably get into our theories later. You have some insight? But yeah, so she really I mean, and she has this deep connection to Lumen. She was in the Lumen school as a girl. She's a true believer in Kier. She had a Kier shrine in her house that she tore down when she got fired. And she even, after being fired, when she found out that the innies had staged the what became known as the macro data uprising, she drives to Lumen headquarters to try to stop Helly R from revealing any sort of innie information at the gala. So she still has this strong allegiance to the company, but she really only wants to work in this one role, which is interesting.
Especially considering, again, super deluxe spoilers here, but especially considering that Helly R is actually Helly E, as in
Yes.
Helly like Egan, as in related to the executive level of Lumen Industries. I almost like Cure Industries, but like what the fuck else, right?
Right.
And so that shows like, you have such a dedication to the company, the cause, the lore, I guess, the Henry Fordification, kind of what you see with Elon Musk, where there are a lot of people who are just evangelists for the guy, and they believe that he is the person with a chalkboard, like writing equations that lead to rockets flying in the air. Like, there's a religiosity, like you were describing, to this that I think she really kind of shows in this, that she's even willing to step over the nepo baby to try to
Mhm.
make sure that like the public face of this company looks good.
Right.
But yeah, like you were saying, go ahead and say whatever you want to, but I'm ready to play the clip if you want to.
Oh yeah, just you can go ahead and play it and we'll talk over it, because this next clip there's no sound that's important, but she's continuing
Right.
her drive down the road and she comes across this road sign that says Salt's Neck. There's no place in the United States named Salt's Neck that we know of. So again, more
238
evidence.
miles away. Yeah.
Yeah. So the more evidence that this is like a semi-fictional world. And at this
Fallout New Vegas.
right. But at this point, we do get to see something important, because we saw her longingly look at the passenger seat earlier, and we see her with this breathing tube that says Charlotte Cobell on it, which set decorators for the show have confirmed is her mother. And that was her breathing tube. So, what her mom's connection to Lumen is, what this symbolizes for her. It's also important to point out that that's a Lumen produced breathing tube.
I'm
Um,
also thinking about this house that's like in the middle of nowhere, again, like
yeah.
238 miles away from Salt's Neck.
Mhm.
Um, and I'm wondering, given that analysis that you just gave, if that could even be Miss Cobell's mom's house,
Right.
potentially. And it's like a symbolic thing where she's trying to figure out this decision, especially since Lumen, this company that's been her entire existence,
Mhm.
has given her this sort of semi-ultimatum here. It's possible, when you combine all of these things in this very symbolic show, that this is her kind of reconciling all these things together.
Mhm. And she obviously has like a come to Kier moment as opposed to a come to Jesus moment here, where she's like, "What the fuck am I doing? I'm in the middle of nowhere." And she flips a bitch and she turns around and we learn, hauls ass all the way back to Lumen headquarters. Now I do want to mention the music she was playing in the car earlier is the song Love Spreads, which is a really popular song from the 90s. And that song was written based off of Rosalind Miles' book, The Women's History of the World. And there is so much thought that goes into every detail of this show. I feel like that can't be a coincidence. Um, and maybe Miss Cobellvig sees herself as like, this woman who's risen to this relatively important position within Lumen and sees herself as powerful, or she's taking inspiration from her mother. Whatever her history is, again, we haven't become aware of that. None of that has been illuminated to us. Hopefully, in the next couple episodes.
Illuminated.
Yeah, illumin. But I just find her, and Patricia Arquette does such a phenomenal job playing. And she's,
Absolutely.
to our knowledge, she's not severed, but she does still do the same thing that all these other actors in the show have to do, which is when you're play two different characters, right? Because we see Adam Scott has to play Innie and Audi Mark, and they are two almost entirely separate people. And she does the same thing with Miss Cobell versus Miss Selvig. And I'm just so interested to see what is the real Miss Cobell. Is it Cobelvig? Is it parts of both of these characters? I'm not sure. But I'm just so excited to see what comes next for her. And there's so many fan theories about, could she potentially be an illegitimate daughter of an Egan? We don't know. I think that that's a really fascinating theory, like an indirect descendant, and she feels like this connection to the company. One thing I will say, we do learn that she has a lot of resentment for Helena Egan in their next interaction. We'll show a clip of that in a minute, but when she confronts her, she says, "I worked to earn everything I got from this company. I wasn't born into it." So
you get a lot of girl boss vibes from Cobelvig, and you get
Yeah.
that dynamic, especially in the workplace. Again, hashtag no politics. But you get a lot of this dynamic where it's like, who is related to the owners of the company versus who is at that same level but doing the work at that company.
Yeah.
I hope Hassan is having a good time in Japan. Why'd I mention that? No reason. Anyway, truly no resentment towards him, but I mean, like, I like, that is a very particular point in all of this where I'm like, oh. At least in my personal life, that, like, but I could see this in a lot of other general ways. But yeah, this sort of this dynamic that I really love, that the writers, Ben Stiller, probably in the direction of this and the inception of this, like, is kind of thinking about, the entire show is kind of workplace dynamics to the extreme. Like, people deal with a work-life balance, and that ends up being something that people try to separate, like, again, their work life and their personal life. So Ben Stiller in the show is like, okay, we're going to literally, like, replace part of your brain. And, like, you're not going to have an idea of this. So it's like, it's taking it to the extreme. But a lot of these things you don't need to take to the extreme, and you're kind of seeing, and I think that it's done to make a particular point. And I definitely think that interaction, which I have queued up and ready to play for in a moment, between Cobelvig and Audi Helly is exactly, remnant of this dynamic.
Yeah. I will say, one person in the audience said that they think that there's a possibility that Cobelvig might be a permanent innie, which I think is a really good theory, because the writers have stressed that, like, first of all, the town that they live in is named Kier. As we said earlier, a great point you made, Dan, was that this is a Kier state, essentially, literally. So
now, not even a company town, but a company state. Like, it's
right.
I need to look up the actual quote unquote name of the state, but it's kind of like one of these Smiling Friends things where it's like, oh, this is definitely America, but this is not the America we know. But it's close enough.
They haven't named the state, but we know that its postal code abbreviation is PE. That's all that we've gotten so far.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, the writers have stressed that, like, we've seen the overtime contingency be activated. It's not limited to the building. Think of the entire area, the surrounding area, as being Lumen property, essentially. So it's totally possible that she could be a permanent innie, hoping to, reintegrate so that she can remember her mom, or, and she grew up in this cult. Could she have been severed as a very young child? I think that that's possible. This might be the only thing that she ever had that belonged to her mother. I don't know if I subscribe to that theory personally, but I think that it's one that has merit to it, because we don't really know what her motivation is. We know she has dirt on Lumen. So I'll cue up this clip by saying, when she's having this confrontation in the parking lot with Helena Egan, she says, or Helena says, "We didn't have to hire you back." To which she responds, "You didn't have a choice." So what knowledge does she have? What dirt does she have on Lumen that she's lording over them? we really don't know. Is it, well, I will say she has this breathing tube of her mother's. If you read the accompanying short book that the writers wrote, it's called The Lexington Letter. If you love the show, read it. It's excellent. They mention in the Lexington Letter that Lumen had some bad publicity regarding faulty feeding tubes, not breathing tubes, but feeding tubes. So could her mother have died because of this faulty breathing tube that Lumen produced? Potentially. We don't know. So maybe she has some evidence that they've been crafting all of these like faulty products and distributing them without proper testing, or they're testing these products on their severed employees, which she would have knowledge of. Again, we don't know, but these are some interesting theories.
No, I do like the theories, especially because I don't want to belabor the clip too much, but especially because the show hasn't fully revealed this, but we can kind of tell the idea that in between the finale of season 1 and the beginning of season 2, that the innies kind of like becoming themselves and unsevering themselves with the outies through the overtime contingency became something so big that the public had to notice, but something that was at least containable so that Lumen was able to control the message through the media that they also probably likely have control of, right?
Right.
And so I think that that could be another case too, where potentially Kobelvig is like saying, okay, I have information that's going to blow your entire media game out of the water. Like, you think that you're able to, you know, spin your way out of this and that or whatever, but actually we've got something that, you know, changes the whole game. So I definitely think that could exist.
Mm-hmm. Okay, but
I'll play this.
Yeah, the clip happens mid argument between the two of them. Helena says something along the lines of "let's reset," which could be "let's reset our conversation," or could be something more sinister. And then she calls Natalie, which is the beginning of this clip.
I definitely felt like it was like a let's reset our entire, like, you know, relationship and everything that's happened, which again, there's a lot going into that, but again, let's watch.
Natalie, please see if the board is available for Miss Cobell and myself.
The way she pauses with the board is kind of suspicious too.
Mm-hmm. And what board is available to meet in the middle of it's late in the evening?
Mm-hmm.
So, for those listening, initially Kobelvig starts to follow Helena up towards the doors of Lumen, you know, which means that the board exists inside of this building, or maybe they're just going to plug in that weird little speaker that they typically use to communicate with the board. Not sure. Yeah. But at this point, Kobelvig stops in her tracks as Helena gets closer to who we are assuming is her driver.
Maybe her bodyguard, right?
Potentially, yeah. But this scene I find really interesting because we see Kobelvig looking at this bodyguard as he steps forward and comes into focus, and she's clearly terrified.
Shocked. Yeah.
Yeah. Recognizes him seemingly and starts to run away. And before she breaks into a full sprint and runs to her car and peels out of the Lumen parking lot. So, I mean, a lot of people doing analysis of this episode have said maybe she was scared the board was going to kill her, but I think that him stepping into focus as Helena blurs from the focus of that scene means that her fear was in seeing this man.
Yeah, and it's like, I forget what, and it's kind of, you kind of hear Kobelvig's real name when Helly goes like Melody or something.
Harmony,
right? Sorry, me and my music theory brain. So it's Harmony Selvig or Harmony Cobell. Yeah. Wild stuff.
I mean,
I definitely thought it was like a Oh no, if you come back, the board is going to kill you in whatever way that means. If it's like,
Right.
destroying your any, but if she's a perm to any, that's probably like, deletion, like real
Mhm.
deletion, right? So yeah.
Yeah, and we don't know a lot about the board because all of the board interactions have been facilitated through Natalie, save for one, which was when Kobelvig gets canned. She says, "Fuck you, Natalie. Is the board even there?" Then there's a long pause before a voice comes out of this speaker and says, "Yes." But it's just one voice. I mean, we also saw the boardroom, which is a massive desk with a ton of seating around it. But what is the board? I'm not sure. My leading theory is that the board is maybe somehow the disembodied existence of Kier Egan, that they've integrated into some sort of technology. Maybe it's just James Egan, who's the current CEO. Maybe it's the disembodied spirits of all of the Egans and the Perpetuity Wing, which is scary as fuck, by the way. Creepy Chuck E. Cheese. Um, I don't know. What do you think about the board?
I think the intersection of the board makes me concerned about Helly, because it's like, okay, you kind of get these ideas in season 1 that Helly is like, we're so confident about this controversial severance procedure, and you kind of see, I forget his name, but one of like the core 4 from MDR tries to get work at another place, and he seems to be vibing with another guy who like looks like him and talks like him, etc.
Dylan,
um
yeah.
yeah,
At Great Doors. It was the
yes.
name of the company.
Real propane and propane accessories head ass, but
Right.
like um in that whole exchange it's going relatively okay, and then he mentions, oh yeah, I used to work at Lumen, I was one of the Severed employees, and it's like, oh, so who am I talking to right now? You get the sense that you
Yeah.
know there's innies, there's outies, and then in any world of course there's normies, right? And you get a sense that there's a lot of normies who are like, oh, this is some big tech or big biotech perhaps weird thing that I've seen some ramifications of, and I've heard some stuff from the press that we can apply these things to our own lives, that maybe we believe what's in the press, but also we probably have a healthy or unhealthy, but probably in these terms healthy distrust of what we see in the Kier Lumen owned press of how Severance is covered, especially after this
Yeah.
the overtime contingency scandal that happened in season 1, right? So you see this reaction to how Severance is treated, and so that all goes back to, okay, even before the scandal, the CEO or like one of the executives of the company was like, I trust in this program so much that my daughter, and there's a question to whether Audi Helly is like really in it because she believes in it, or it's more of like the other baddie redhead from Succession, who like was kind of in it but also like had her own thing going on. It's difficult to kind of tell like where she is, but definitely because of this entire situation, especially the interaction with Kobelvig, makes her seem very suspicious, very very suspicious, to the
Right.
point where like I look back and we're figuring out how we're going to cover the previous episodes, and given how Apple TV releases these series, it's going to take a long time. So we'll have plenty of time to cover series 1 or season 1 rather, right? But looking back and especially watching this new episode, I have to look at Helly with side eye, because it's like, okay, everyone else is truly Kobelvik was cooking. Like
Right.
everyone else is truly a worker there. Some people are like lifers who have dedicated their lives to this company, literally their brains to this company and their
Mhm.
long lives. Even Mark has only been there for a little while, right? But like, a
Yeah,
lot of
like
people have
2
been there for
years.
20, 30 years, right?
Yeah.
Um Helly is a Nepo baby, but she's also severed. And we kind of understand that her any really did not like the severed situation, right? So I think there's a lot of nuance there, but
Mhm.
I think the way we've seen Audi Helly so far be kind of like a good little girl for her dad, who's like executive of the company.
Her creepy
Makes
dad.
me makes me very, very sus about the entire thing. Again, like, not that she's out of the hook, because I think there could be a power dynamic, especially with that creepy dad, that makes that like dictate some of Audi Helly's decisions. But still, right now she is acting for either on her own accord or for some power outside of hers accord as a kind of villainous figure.
I will just say really quick before we pivot to one of the other management characters, Seth Milchek. Oh my God. But I will say that there is so much credit to what you're saying about their power with the media, because in the Lexington letter, let me just quickly give like a 10-second recap of what it is. A severed employee at a different branch mails this long letter to somebody who works at a newspaper about her experience with her innie, and they were exchanging letters back and forth using a fake language she invented with her sister growing up as children, so it wasn't picked up by the sensors in the elevator. And she's trying to bring awareness to what she thinks is Lumen using these macro data refiners to sabotage rival companies, because there is an explosion that happens right after she finishes her quarter work or whatever it is. She finishes her file, and then like 10 minutes later, a truck explodes from a rival company, and the Audi is convinced that it was what she was refining that caused that explosion. I think that that's a misdirection on the part of the writers, but she gives all this information to a journalist who says that we see the journalist emailing with her boss, and she's saying, hey, I think this is a really important story. I want to follow up on it. What do you think? And he puts it down. Essentially, he says, I reached out to a trusted contact at Lumen. They say that all of this is BS. We learn that the editor of the newspaper's last name is Milchek. So his trusted contact on the inside, we can assume, is Seth Milchek. So it's clear, as Devin said in the season finale, Lumen has its hands in a lot of pies. So you don't know in the media who you can trust. And that was just them saying more and more. This is why it's so hard to get information out about the practices at Lumen.
I know we want to move on, but it's an interesting question in chat that I want to pose to you. Muhammad Yusuf, thanks for watching, says, do you think any Helly protested the severance process because her Audi subconsciously hated that she had to do it? I think it might be the other way around. Like, I think there were signs in season 1 that Audi Helly was aware, and not just spoiler warning, but also a little bit of a minor trigger warning, but there are like physical signs that any Helly was not happy, that Audi Helly was able to see, and probably the people around her high up in the company were able to see. So they're probably like kind of aware, like, okay, there's some like, trickiness going on to the severance process. But given that this is happening like literally inside the family, we're a company, we're a family, have some pizza. Given that this was in the scope of the family, it seemed like it was something they wanted to address fairly quickly. But yeah, I want to hear what your thoughts are.
Yeah, no, I think that that's a really interesting point. I mean, we see, and we'll talk about Helly R versus Helena in a little bit, but I think that we see that Helly R versus Helena is a free individual, right? She gets to make, despite being a slave to Lumen, she has more agency than Helena does. And I think that's why we see Helena looking back over that footage of Helly R kissing Mark, watching it over and over again, because she's jealous, essentially, of Helly, that she has this freedom, she has this agency, she has this boldness that does not exist in Helena, who has sort of been raised in this cult of Kier, who has been raised in this, groomed from a young age, essentially, to become the CEO, seemingly, and that she has to dedicate every part of herself, including her brain, to this company. And I think that it says a lot about her that she, and I fully believe that in this season, we'll talk about this in a minute, that there is no Helly R anymore. Helena is the person on the severed floor, undercover for the company, that she is not, that when she goes down the elevator, she is not turning into her innie. She's Helena all the time, playing a character. But I will say I think that she has a lot of jealousy there. She's obviously not free when she is on the outside. She's owned essentially by this company, and and I think that that's evidenced by the fact that she should theoretically have not have had to sever to do this public outreach campaign. She could have gone down there as herself, pretending to be severed from the very beginning, but she was probably pressured into doing this without really knowing the dangers or the ramifications. And she was really able at that time to think, and we see her in the video say this, that innies are not people. You're not a person. But now she has to grapple with the fact that these are people. They might not be the same people that they are when they go up the elevator and leave the building, but the innies are people. They have personhood. They have agency. They have wants, loves, desires. They have dreams of what they might be like on the outside. They are people. And she has to sort of marry these two ideas of what she was raised being told versus what she's now experiencing firsthand.
Almost like capitalism. Huh.
Workers are people. They're not just numbers.
You can't just separate yourself in the workplace from yourself in life. They are together, and your needs and your values intertwine. Interesting. It's communist China. Anyways,
let's talk about Seth.
Yeah, Seth Milchick, who in honor of Black History Month, I'll take a quick lead on here. He has been, and I will use my cards judiciously here, he's been kind of the good old boy for Lumen and Kier, especially when Kobelvig was in charge. And so taking over Kobelvig's role, managing the severed floor that features, like one of the flagship severed floors that features the macro data refinement office that Mark is part of. You can tell, like many middle managers, especially in season 1, is dealing with most of the shit. Like in season 1, you see a lot of Kobelvig like calling the shots for an office. Meanwhile, Milchick is the one who is interfacing actually with these troublesome workers, right? And as even in this season so far, the 3 episodes in, you don't really see him in Kobelvig's role. Like a lot of people who are like hired to fill their managers' jobs, they're given like quadruple the work, and so they don't quite get the same sort of like I get to just tell people how to live sort of thing that you see.
I mean, his new enforcer essentially is literally a child, is literally a 14-year-old girl. So he doesn't even have like a human adult to put some work off onto. Like, he's gonna have to shoulder so much more than Kobelvig.
Destiny, if you're listening. So yeah, so like there's a lot of stuff that Milchick has to deal with right now. And he's trying to put on a good face, and kind of surprisingly, we'll do episode 2 at some point, right? But kind of surprisingly, he in episode 1 as well, he gives Mark what he wants, in that he gets to have his old team back, so much so that Audi Milchick, which definitely seems to be like one of these like any Audi folks who is fully aware of what life is like on the severed floor, and also able to recall that when they're outside of work. But Milchick is definitely, he went to the lengths of rehiring, Helena notwithstanding, but rehiring the other two so that Mark could have his core 4 back, because Cold Harbor is, I believe, the project, whatever it's called, right? It's like, it's so important. Yeah, it's so important to what Lumen is working on, and Mark is so good at it. That's like, okay, if he works well with this team, Yahtzee, that's what's important to us, is making sure that works. So yeah, like I think that Seth is really playing an interesting part here, because he is overworked and underappreciated. And in this episode, you kind of see again, it's almost like the show is an allegory for capitalism in the actual workplace. In this episode, you see Milchek appreciated in a certain way, and thank you for grabbing this clip because I think it's just amazing.
As soon as, and you'll hear in the clip, people watching, as soon as Natalie says a reimagined Kier, I was like, it's not going to be blackface Kier. Surely it cannot be blackface Kier.
And then they hit him with the blackface Kier.
Let's set this up for a second. We see Milchek come into the office late, and he sees Mark's balloons hovering in the hallway at half mast because he had abandoned them. Apparently, we can assume it's been like a week now. And we know that Milchek comes in late, we as the viewer, because he was going to get Dylan G's wife to come do this conjugal visit, essentially, with his innie. And he comes in pissed. He's already angry. He opens his office door, and there is creepy fucking Natalie smiling at him with the board in her ear. And that leads us to this amazing scene.
The board austerely desires for you to feel connected to Lumen's history. To that end, please accept from the board these inclusively recanonicalized paintings intended to help you see yourself in Kier, our founder.
He opens up this like easel
and finds blackface Kier Egan
Mustache
staring back
doll.
at him.
Oh my.
You'll find the whole Kier cycle.
So we see some pictures here that we've seen hung up around the office before. This one is the youthful convalescence of Kier. I hate that I know it by name. And Kier invites you to drink of his water.
On receipt of my current position, and found it extremely moving.
That was the part. Sorry, I gotta pull the old Sam Cedar, pause it for a second. I think I do have it on the audio face thing. So, oh wait, no. It's sorry. There we go.
Pause it for a second.
There. When she said, and I belabor the point, so I gotta like go back to what she said. But when she said this, an already rough scene for me as a Black person to watch, like my jaw dropped to the floor.
I, Natalie, received this same gift upon receipt of my current position, and found it extremely moving.
When it's like, not only is this blackface Kier, but nigga, you ain't the first person to get blackface Kier. This little mulatto, this assistant girl over here, like she fair skin honey over here. Like she also got the same again, wood, but like she also got the same gift too. All right. And so don't feel special. And like don't even feel like you're the first person to feel insulted. It's like again, not to put anybody on blast, but as someone who has been like, oh, this is an identity affirming month or period for you, you. How about you do the identity affirming to show that this company affirms the identity? And it's like,
right.
Hey. How about the people who identify with this identity do less the fucking work during this month? Like, if you're gonna celebrate it and you're gonna be like how dedicated you are, how about some of the people who are quote unquote allies show the fucking dedication? Because I'm dedicated to whatever identity I am because I fucking live it so hard that you came up to me. I didn't volunteer. You came up to me and you're like, hey, do you want to do this thing that affirms your identity? You know, it's your month. It's your week. It's your day.
Give the presentation on Black History Month. You should give the presentation on Black History Month. We want to give you more work to celebrate your month. Isn't that exciting?
You should arrange.
Love the idea.
You should arrange the Pride special. It would be so great because you queers would be so good at putting on a show. I love theater. It's really.
I have had that experience. at a company where I did not disclose my sexuality, they came up to me and asked me if I would be interested in helping present for Pride Month. And I was like, do I have dyke written on my forehead? Like, what? I was like, how did you know?
That's so loud.
It's like, I always joke that I have gay face, but I was like, all right, okay. I guess that we're just measuring my skull with the calipers to determine if I eat box or not.
I love the idea. I love the idea of like there's transvestigators within the office. It's like no microaggressions, old white boomer executives don't understand. But the gaydar, they understand that. They lived through the 60s.
I will say one thing I really love about this scene is, and late bloomer, you're not wrong at all in your in the point that you're making. Milchick is obviously horrified, and I didn't cut this clip because I didn't think it was super important, but we'll just discuss it now. After the scene, we see Milchick go into the back storage room and hide the box of pictures as far in the back of the storage room, as high up as possible, because he is completely mortified. And we see him look at Natalie, begging for her to acknowledge how insane this is. And he doesn't get that from Natalie, but I think that she's trying to give it to him. I agree. We don't know what access Lumen has. Is the board looking at him through her eyes? We don't know. And so we see her lip quiver, and she pulls a face that is obviously a face of like, she's scared.
I have like 40 seconds more of the clip. I mean, I know you didn't pull it. Like, we're gonna play more of this, but yeah, that lip quiver I definitely caught.
Yeah, I mean, she's also
#wood.
She wants to affirm his saying this shit is crazy, but she can't.
And sorry, super last thing, because again, this is an allegory about the workplace. I have had the experience, and I'm sure maybe you as a female, you know, like people who are lucky enough to have someone else of a shared identity in the workplace, sometimes are able to give each other a look at a certain point that are just like, what? And it's like, I relate to a similar look of like being one of two Black people in a workplace and he's seeing something and just like turning to that one Black person and just giving them the look. And we both know what that look means instantly of just like, yeah, we both just heard that. But like, did we really just hear that?
Right.
And yeah, that affirmation is definitely there. I'm kind of, go, look at you, white boy. Go you, Ben Stiller. Fucking logic ass Ben Stiller over here. Anyways, here's the next like 40 seconds of this clip. I'll go back to one of easily the most haunting moment of the show for me so far. But yeah.
The board wishes to express that I, Natalie, received the same gift upon receipt of my current position and found it extremely moving.
I'm grateful.
Yes.
It's meaningful to see myself reflected in
The board has concluded the call.
Yeah.
You gotta understand that Seth is giving Natalie Bam eyes right now. Like, it's just like, it's that nigga, what?
Congratulations, Seth.
So we do see her. She obviously was not thrilled by this either. But I mean, one thing we can say here is we've seen Milchick through the whole first season, and Tremel Tillman, the actor who plays him, fucking phenomenal in this role. And this is one of his first big roles on television. He was a Broadway actor before this. He kills it. I cannot.
No, I'll give it to Apple. Like, other than Adam Scott and, you know, a couple of other folks here and there, they've like littered through in a kind of almost like Wire kind of way. They're putting a lot of like unknown regular talent on
Yeah.
Like, I'm following the Instagram of the actress who plays Helena for purely journalistic reasons. And I've noticed that just in like season 2, she's gone from like 70,000 followers to like 120,000 followers.
Right.
And then, like, you love to see that. And again, like, it's me, Dan from the internet. I'm not the biggest like numbers is your value guy, of course, but that was kind of interesting with The Wire, and that's what people started liking about is like, okay, there are a couple of like major artists here and there, like there are a couple of hitters, sorry, like major actors and stuff, but like a lot of the greatness of the show is the fact that these are regular people playing regular people, right? And like it feels really really useful because of that. Like it feels really good because of that.
Absolutely. I mean, you've got the heavy hitters. You've got, I mean, Adam Scott, not like a box office sort of actor, but he's been in so much, like so many comedy TV shows, movies. You've got
If you live in a major city and know like a white guy in his like mid-20s, early 30s who's like perpetually single but kind of charming, like that's Adam Scott to a T, which is kind of amazing also because like in this episode he kind of breaks character in that, and you see him being assertive, and I'm like, ooh, okay, he's a switch.
But yeah, I mean, you've got John Turturro, you've got Christopher Walken, you've got the amazing Patricia Arquette, but
yes,
you're right. What's her name? Britt Lauer plays Helly R. You've got Dylan G's actor's only been in a couple things, a couple comedic roles here and there. I'm not sure about his sister Devin, who is phenomenal in the show. Rickon's actor is so hilarious. His comedic timing is impeccable. They really gave a lot of people a shot here, and I will say the one that, I mean, they're all great, but I think the one that really knocked it out of the park is Tremel Tillman as Seth Milchek, because I was watching an interview with him where he describes how the character is described to him, and it was just a company man. And he took that very little information to go off of and created this extremely rich character. And I think this season we're going to see a lot more of him grappling with the fact that he's dedicated his life to this company. He's done so much for this company, and they're trying to reward him by saying, hey, black guy, here's a picture of Black Keir Egan. I mean, he's like, I have created an identity here. I've done so much good work here, and you just called me the N-word. Are you kidding me? And this episode debuted on the first day of Black History.
I have some of the Power Report sound clips from here. Yes.
I also my girlfriend made a comment to me about how they gave him a DEI present. Like,
here, Blackie. Like it's
so racist.
It's so insane. And yeah, I just plus one everything you said about the way that Tremel Tillman, like, I'm doing a lot of like retro watching too. I'm in that era right now. And I'm watching Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. And the actor who played Jeffrey, Joseph Marcel, I'm just like, there's some people like that, and yes, this is Black History Month, so I'm looking at like certain like Black supporting characters who like really hold the show together, and I really believe the Seth Milchek characters are definitely going to do that. And I kind of knew that from my favorite episode of Severance so far, which this is pretty close, but you never forget your first. Right. And I think my favorite episode is still Defiant Jazz from the first season.
Yes!
With the music dance experience, and you kind of see Seth's character come out of like, okay, I've been a hard ass, but now I'm required on paper to not be a hard ass. And so here you go. And that is like, no, I could show that episode in Union. Like, this is a very highbrow show, Severance, but I could show the episode Defiant Jazz in Union Halls and they'll understand the point.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, I think the show does such an excellent job, and we'll move on in a second, but I think the show does such an excellent job at capturing the bullshit of corporate incentives and and I'm lucky that I work in public interest, so I have been blessed to not have worked too many corporate jobs generally, but the show really captures with the fucking finger traps, the character portraits, the waffle party.
The separation of different departments where you can be in an organization so big where it's like
Right.
you see these people, but they're in a different, maybe it's not as cavernous as the IBM / like Lumen offices, right? But it's a big office and you don't see what these people do, and maybe you only interact with them once a year on some,
Right.
Microsoft Teams or Slack or something like that. But no, it's really even, and again, I'm going to do my best to just like generally keep the separation of church and state here as well. And I enjoy the work that I do at my day job. Definitely much more than doing political media work full time, for fuck's sake. But like, even in the best of spaces, it just happens when you have an organization of a certain size in this system where things get a little bit to go from like my old British history. There's a show on the BBC from the 1980s and 90s called Yes Minister, and it's kind of this like show about bureaucracy. It's like DMV the series basically, right? And it's like all this, oh yeah, well I would do this, but I have to fill out this paperwork and I have to go to this person, then I have to sign it, and I'm taking this person. It's like yeah, it's like we get it. But Severance captures that in like, it captures that unsexiness in a really sexy way. I'm not just talking about the actors and their appearances because they're like all on point, right? But like
they are beautiful.
Yes, this is an Apple.
Work in the goat room, but aside from Gwendolyn Christie, but the rest of
this is an Apple product, and also given the circle, I need to like give another look at the circle, but a couple of drinks maybe. Anyways, yeah, should we go on to the next clip whether because I know we want to kind of like, we were talking about Milchick, right? And all of this stuff, but yeah, you can kind of tell maybe if you're gonna see some hints of Milchick, like if there's a betrayal coming down the line, or if there's like okay, I'm no longer drinking the, forgive the phrase on Black History Month, but I'm no longer drinking the Kool-Aid of Lumen, right? Which is interesting because, again, I alluded to this earlier. I don't want to make this the longest podcast ever, but the logo in the middle of Lumen currently is a water droplet. I think that's important. More on that later. But there's a potential to where, again, pardon the phrase, but I'm being cheeky, Milchick stops drinking the Kool-Aid and goes, okay, whatever situation where Milchick sees one of the innies running the overtime contingency or sneaking into that security room or doing something that, and you kind of already seen it, like that they'll give Mark what he wants, right? You may see this point where like he's willing to rebel against Lumen because he's like, they basically call me everything but a son of God.
I mean, he might have a breaking point where he's just like, that is not my fucking job. Whatever the innies are doing, I don't give a shit anymore. I will say really quick, I want to talk quickly about Irv and Dylan G's in this episode.
Yeah,
I don't have any clips that I edit. They have pretty small roles in this episode, but Irv is my favorite character and I love him to death. So I want to mention
Dylan's my favorite character and I love him to death. So let's go.
Dylan is excellent, but as long as we're also talking about Milchick and the incentives, he's finally found an incentive that works for Dylan G, which is his family on the outside. So he brings in Dylan G's Audi wife, Gretchen, to meet any Dylan G. And we also get a little peek into the home life of Audi, Dylan G, and Gretchen and their 3 kids, where we learn that Dylan G is a fuck up, which is funny because she says he's never really found his thing. But the Dylan G we know is fucking killing it at macro data refinement. He did find his
yeah.
thing. It was just severed because he's good at his job.
I mean, probably became, you can kind of tell once his innie is figuring out the deal, is that like, oh, once like he probably got to the point where he was desperate enough to find his thing and support his family and his 3 kids and his beautiful like I love his question with the innie's like, oh, do we live on a farm?
Right.
When they're looking at the photo of them when they're in an attire that makes them look like farmers and stuff, like when those family photo style things.
Yeah.
That's so amazing. And you can tell like it's interesting seeing the interaction of Dylan's wife with Dylan as his outie. Because I think like Dylan's wife is going to work. I think she has like a night job or something. And then
Some sort of
outie Dylan's
security
watching the
guard
kid.
job. Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe at
Yeah.
Lumen.
Makes sense, right? You know, because like a security guard job is, you know, and God bless security workers. I know I've many people in my family who do that work too, right? I have a inside baseball, but I have a uncle who was a security guard at One Oak in Hollywood. It's like Jay-Z's club, like one of the really popular clubs in West Hollywood. The first time he heard about Hassan was like, dude, there was this most annoying guy ever at the no I'm kidding. No. But no, he saw a lot. And so like, but you know, it's a job that definitely doesn't require like a college degree, right? Like it's just like a sort of if you're in a company town and you have a spouse, and I can relate to this in the way that like I know people who are like military spouses, right? And so they have to travel a lot with their partner wherever they're deployed to. And so their jobs oftentimes, if they can't work from home, which is oftentimes the case, are dictated by whatever is around there. And so yeah, security guard is in the area, so sure. But that is all to say, when she is leaving, Dylan's like, oh yeah, how'd the thing go? And definitely Dylan's wife is pretty shook by the whole thing. She's like, it was definitely really weird. But you know, I think she was like expecting, like, yeah, I knew it was gonna be weird, but you know, it's happening and it's, you know, it is what it is. So there. Yeah.
And I also just note that she says I love you to Innie Dylan and not to Outie Dylan when she's leaving the house. She says I love you when she's leaving their meeting, but not when she's leaving for work. So
that's a woman detail. I missed that.
Maybe they're setting up that she falls for this successful Innie Dylan G who has all the characteristics that she loves of her husband without this sort of like failure hangups. And this guy is really excited about these children that he's met one of them for fucking 3 seconds, but you know, has this desire to be a present father versus what we see of Innie Dylan G, he's just kind of sitting on the couch reading midlife automobiles or something, and he looks like a loser.
hey. A man loves his Top Gear, all right? No. You're right.
I will say Irv, my favorite character, his part is small in this episode, but consequential because he goes to optics and design, O&D, to pass out this feckless wanted poster, not wanted poster. Have you seen missing person poster of Miss Casey? He speaks with Felicia, who is like the number 2 of the department under Bert. I can assume she's ascended to the head of the department now. And she's really happy to see him. He shows her all these pictures he drew of Bert. And she flips one page further and finds his picture of this elevator, the painting that we've seen his outie doing over and over and over and over again, trying to get a message to the innie. And she recognizes it and says, that's the exports hall. That's the exports elevator. So we learn this very important information. She knows where it is. And we can assume she relayed that information to Irv, which was his point in this episode. But I'm really fucking interested to see where that leads, because we know that that's where Gemma / Miss Casey is being kept.
Oh yeah. Should I play this clip?
Yeah, I do want to set it up a little bit. We're going to move on to Helena and Mark now.
Sorry, that was abrupt.
No, you're fine. I'm firmly of the belief that Helena is not Heliar. She's Helena undercover in macro data refinement. And I pulled this is 2 clips strung together that I think sort of give an insight to behavior that is not like the Heliar that we have known.
Don't trust these hoes Rayyvana over here. It's gonna be very
She's fake. She's false. She's
Okay.
Trixie.
okay. She's Trixie Tang.
You haven't been back there, have you?
No, no.
We got you.
Mm.
Thank you, Helly.
I think that Irv is onto her. We can pause there for a second. I think Irv is onto her because of her night gardener bullshit. I think that he's suspicious of her, and that was just a little bit out of character for her because she's bold, but she's not necessarily been a source of comfort for the other people in the office. In fact, she's kind of been the opposite.
Yeah, she's been a. I'm gonna let you say that because if these words come out of my mouth, it's gonna be noted sexist Dan from the internet, and that's
She's
gonna go.
been a little bit of a bitch.
I wasn't gonna go that far, but she did kind of try to delete herself, and like Mark had to like clean up the pieces, and
Yeah.
Mark and Annie is like complicating it and like, hey, no matter what happens, let's yeah. So it's she's definitely not been the kind of person to be comforting. Definitely, maybe the experience of going in and out and like having that severance connect, so to speak, of her inside and outside world maybe gives her some confidence, but also she has to then know, like you're saying, which I think makes sense. How can she separate the fact that she knows her outie is a nepo baby and therefore her innie is a nepo baby? So
Right.
yeah, like a lot of your viewers are saying, the zero and elite. I'm gonna go with that. I think this is her outie. Yeah. Which goes to say, like, was there a point where her innie and her outie, like her innie was actually like in the show, but maybe her innie was removed or whatever the word for is that, and
Has
now
she
her
been
outie is in?
reintegrated?
Yeah.
We don't know. I mean, the board denies the existence of reintegration, but we've got Ragabi out here. We'll talk about her in a little bit. I will say this next clip that this leads into, I think, is just more evidence that this is Helena and not Helly, because there's this weird standoff between her and Mark, where the Heliar we know would not be so passive. She would kiss that man as she did before. But here, they're just kind of playing chicken and there's no kissing.
Ray wants the goods.
Well, no, I'm a Gemma Mark shipper.
Oh, okay.
He's a
Okay.
wife guy. I want him with his wife. But
Okay, outie Mark is a wife guy. Any Mark is a work wife guy. Okay,
that's true.
so
That's true. That's his work
yeah.
wife. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. No. That's the work wife he tells you not to worry about type deal.
Exactly.
Are you sure you're okay helping me?
Literal
with this?
fuck me eyes.
Yeah, of course.
Okay, good.
Literal fuck me eyes for Mark too.
They're so close. They're edging.
This is Apple. This is Apple. This is Apple. No nubs. No nubs. What would Steve Jobs do? And he fumbles the ball.
And he fumbles big time. I will say more evidence that this is outie Helena and not any Heliar as we know it. Immediately after this, they walk up to the goat room where we know Mark and Helly have previously been. Before she opens the door, she says, Is this it? Heliar would need to ask that question. She's been there. She knows that is it. And
Who
then
am
they
I?
climb through the rabbit hole, more Alice in Wonderland imagery, to get to Mammalian's I don't remember, it's some weird the goat room. Essentially they go to
Yeah.
the big goat room, and she's like hesitant to crawl through there. Heliar, that we know, is bold. She doesn't give a fuck. She tried to commit suicide in the elevator, okay? She doesn't care about some goat poop on the floor.
Mammalian's nurturable, which
Mammalian's
I think is a really
nurturable, thank
nice
you.
name. Yeah. So yeah, like you can literally read into that in the however many languages this is getting translated into right now. But yeah, it's like feeding goats. Macro data refinement is sort of like, it kind of makes sense. It's like you're organizing data, which makes sense when you look at the computer program that they're doing in that like weird quadrant cubicle that they've got in MDR. I forget the department. Optics and design makes sense, like for what they're doing, like O&D.
Right.
Again, the flashcards for killing people. And,
Yes.
you know,
The hatchets.
one of the more important jobs that you can have at a company. But yeah, Mammalian's nurturable is definitely like it's like accounts payable or like accounts receivable, but it's literally like feeding goats,
Which I think is
feeding goats.
really interesting, because in the first episode, one of the first questions that Heliar asks is, am I livestock? Now we're learning there is livestock inside of Lumen, and what they're doing with it. We know that at a certain age, they're stealing these baby goats away to do something with them. God knows what. But I just thought that was an interesting, like, harken back to something that she said. I will also say, Gwendolyn Christie, I got up off the couch and pointed at the screen and yelled, Brienne of Tar! When I saw her.
We need like a lesbian Ray sound drop, because like to be fair, I'm very bad with knowing celebrities, but when you mentioned that, I was like,
she's so tall. She towers over everyone else in the department, and it's phenomenal.
Which works because it's a hilly floor, for lack of a better term, and because of the hills, I honestly didn't know that, and because I'm used to Brienne of Tarth, like it took me a little while to actually see her as like Mammalian's nurturable, and damn, that woman plays a hard ass very well. She plays a boss bitch very well. All right. And I agree with this comment here. She's just scary in this episode. She is, but just like in Game of Thrones, she's got a heart of gold.
I will say, we learn also that the rumors about we learned that Miss Casey has gone to this department. She was giving sessions in their husbandry tanks, apparently. But we also learned that the rumors about macro data refinement were not limited to O&D, because they asked to see their bellies before they leave to confirm whether or not they have these pouches. For their whatever, I can't remember, it was amoeba or whatever, the leech or whatever that takes over their body, that we learned from Bert G in the first season, which is interesting. But if we're going to just truck through and talk about, well, I don't know. Do you have any theories about the goats?
I think the only thing I'll say, I always promise I'll be quick, and then that definitely doesn't happen. If only my sex life were like that. It's usually the other way around. But like, I think there's something in the intro where, I think that was a really astute point you made, where any heli is asking, "Are we livestock?" And then there's like literally livestock. Mind the poop. Episode title. But like, there's something to be said about capitalism, of like, you may think you're top dog, but there's a top dog above that top dog above that top dog. Like it almost feels like a pyramid scheme. But yeah, everyone's trying to figure out, and because of this separation, hashtag no politics. That being said, Karl Marx talks about this, like, and a lot of political economists talk about this separation of the worker from the means of production and their labor and like what they're actually producing, instead like working on one particular piece of the like one particular widget that makes the overall deliverable to use like very worker terms, right? But because of this separation, all of these different departments that are ostensibly working at the same company are stuck trying to figure out, because
Yeah.
their bosses either don't know or won't tell them like what the hell is going on and what they're actually doing, and like what is the actual goal here. And I understand like in certain workplaces that's like more obvious like what you're doing, but I feel like that's really common in a lot of workplaces. Like, okay, yes, our goal is this, but what are our like long term, how are we growing, what are our strategies? And it always feels like the sort of like nebulous up in the air thing, where oftentimes the only connection that workers have is just trying to figure out where in the obelisk, like where in the monolith that they're like currently
Right.
existing in, and where that monolith is heading towards.
Mm-hmm. That's a really good point. I also just want to point out something that the Zero said in chat about the goat symbolism that we've seen throughout the show. So we know for a fact, it was confirmed in the Lexington letter that what the feelings that they experience when they're sorting the data are the four tempers: woe, malice, frolic, and dread. And we know that the
Scientology.
right. We know that the goats represent malice. We saw in the waffle party the four people that come out who are supposedly, I don't know, gonna fuck Dylan while he's wearing his Kier mask. They represent the four tempers, and one of them is the goat. And we've learned through the paintings that the goat represents the temper of malice. But I don't know necessarily if that gives us insight into what they're doing with the goats in actuality. I wish I had a more thought out theory about it. The creators have confirmed that they're not cloning, so I really have no clue. But I think that the symbolism is present throughout the show, and it was important to point out. So thank you for mentioning that in the chat. But let's talk about Mark. We got to talk about our main character. We saved the best for last because, and what happens at the end of the episode, I think, is what made this my favorite episode, because we see Mark is trying to figure out how long it takes for him to get from his car down the elevator, because his plan is, and it's poorly thought out, just like any Mark's plan to hand out missing person posters is poorly thought out. He wants to burn a message into his retinas and needs to figure out how much time he needs that message to stay there so that he can get it to any Mark. And it
goes back to that second counting that we were talking about earlier in this episode. Yes,
exactly. So we learned that it's about 1 minute and 45 seconds is how long this message needs to stay burned into his retinas. We see him plotting with Devin. They're trying to figure out how to make it, and they create this little contraption, which is very cute. And then he takes it in his car. He puts a blanket over his head, and he's figuring out how long he can keep it, how long he needs to look at it to keep it in his field of vision. And then we get this jump scare of Rugabi. He pulls it off his head, and Rugabi, who we haven't seen in a long time, is standing in front of his car. She obviously calls out what a poorly thought out plan this is, and reminds him the only way to actually get a message in and out of Lumen is to reintegrate. And immediately Mark is resistant to this idea because he saw Petey experiencing in a reintegration sickness before ultimately untimely dying. So he's like, no, fuck that. I don't want to do it, until Rugabi confirms she saw Gemma alive inside of Lumen. As soon as he has this information confirmed to him, he's all for reintegration. I will say there's a really interesting line. Rugabi says to him, I can sew together a version of you that loves her with a version of you that can. And before she finishes the sentence, he cuts her off and says, do it.
You do it.
Let's do it. So we have no idea what she was going to finish that sentence with, which is so frustrating as a viewer. But again, confirming that He's a wife guy.
Wife guy, yeah. No,
say
it almost makes. Go ahead.
I was just really quickly, I'll say, I think it's really interesting because we've seen Mark be manipulated by his wife's death many times throughout the show. We learned that that's initially what motivated him to get severed. We see Seth Milchek in his house with him the episode prior to this, manipulating him again with that trauma of his wife dying to get him to come back to work at Lumen. And now we see Rugabi, who worked for Lumen, doing the severance process, manipulating Mark in the exact same way to get reintegrated. One thing she says that I think is super important, because when he points out, yeah, it didn't really work out for Petey, did it? She says, I've gotten better at it. How could she have gotten better at it unless she's performed the procedure on other people? Who else has reintegrated during this time between when Petey died and when she killed Mr. Grainer? And now we're seeing her again some weeks later. She's reintegrated somebody. Personally, I think that it's Bert. I can't really give you a reason why, other than the fact that he found Irv knocking at his door, screaming for him. He knows something's up with Lumen. I think she reintegrated him. We know he's following Irv around now. I don't think she's evil either, Zero. I just think that she was manipulating Mark to get him to reintegrate, because I think otherwise he would not have done it. Without that motivating factor of his wife, he would not have done it. And I think that she played on his vulnerabilities
Weakness.
there.
Yeah,
exactly. She went to the Lumen School of Manipulation, okay? She worked there. I think that she has good motives, but she also wasn't very hung up about Petey's death. So I think she doesn't necessarily care about them as individuals, more so that she cares about ending Severance as an institution. I think that she's more goal-oriented.
I wonder if Gemma, like Petey, like Audi Mark's wife, was like one of those people that was also like reintegrated, but like poorly, because you sort of see like how it's and again, I love it reminds you of Meet the Robinsons, the Disney movie, which is like very retro futurist, or even The Incredibles, any sort of like spy film that like makes fun of that like era, because it's like sort of high tech, but it's very lo-fi, and you're just looking at these like frequency waves trying to connect, and one wave represents the Audi and one wave represents the Innie, and slowly like they're asking questions, like Rugabi is asking questions like, how much of yourself do you remember, as a reference to be like, okay, how am I talking to Audi Mark, who has a reference to these life things, or am I talking to any Mark who has no reference to these life things and only knows about work inside of inside of Lumen. So yeah, I think they're so, and I like, this is what makes it such a good show to like think about and talk about, because there's so much you can kind of like dig into and think about where things go, and so many theories that are left unanswered. And Ben Stiller's smug ass is just like, you're gonna have to wait for that. You have to wait for that.
Okay, let's play this clip and then I will respond to a chat question after, because I think that a good point was made that anyway, this is the scene where Mark reintegrates, and the series of questions obviously parallels the series of questions that we saw Mark ask Kelly in the very first episode when she severs for the first time.
Who am I?
Okay, so
we started. Who am I?
Saul Rugabi.
Where are we?
My basement.
What was your mother's name?
Fern Scout.
What was her eye color?
Average son.
Seriously?
Brown. Brown.
Did you love her?
Yeah.
Name a dam.
Hoover.
What does MDR stand for?
What?
MDR.
I love this scene.
That's wrong. What is something for which you feel shame? Shame.
My dog died when I was a kid. It was my fault.
Why?
I left the gate open.
Where were you born?
Sorry, can I pause here?
Of course.
But the scream I screamt during this entire scene because I realized he's wearing the same red sweater from the
Yes.
season 2 intro. And so I'm like, oh, this is a moment. This is
Mhm.
happening right now. Yeah,
There's
and
al-
I agree with Zero. The cinematography is phenomenal here.
There's so much good color theory in this show. We see red represent Audi Mark all the time. Red is not a color you see at Lumen save for Helly's hair. Versus when you're in Lumen, we
Wood.
see these blues and these greens. And Mark even has two beta fish that beta fish can't survive in the same tank. So he has two tanks. He has a blue beta fish and a red beta fish right next to each other. And when Dylan attacks Milchek during the music dance experience, that's the first time we really see red inside of Lumen, because the lights, the overhead lights, start blaring red right before Dylan has this bites him and draws blood. They do so well with this consistency and the color theory. But yes, that is absolutely what he's wearing in that season 2 intro, which is phenomenal and has so many good Easter eggs in it. It could use its own podcast just itself.
This is the stuff that arouses me, frankly. I just love this shit. Yes.
Mhm.
Yeah, I'll play the rest 50 seconds of this.
I'm not sure.
What month is it?
You mean what quarter?
Wait.
What is your first memory?
I don't know.
Tell me. Tell me.
I don't know.
Tell me your first memory.
Hey there, you on the table. I wonder if you'd mind taking a brief survey. 5 questions. To start out, who are you?
And then diabolically, the episode ends right there.
But the
Like-
fade to white is so important. Every episode prior to this fades to black. This is the first episode we see fade to white, because every other episode, Mark's been in the dark. He's finally being illuminated with all of his memories pieced together. I stood up and wanted to clap at the TV at that. My jaw was on the floor.
I was one of those hogs that was like clapping when the plane lands, that, you know,
right.
in Trump's America might honestly be a good thing to do. But, you know, like generally I was just like, Apple, you did it. And I have to be my bougie LA person for a minute. And, you know, my prior jobs notwithstanding. But Apple was very much the ugly duckling in Hollywood. Like literally, like Amazon had bigger offices. Netflix had huge offices on prime real estate. Apple started in Hollywood by buying Beats Music, which was a little tiny corner office in Culver City, with some of the worst parkers of all time. And they eventually were part of Culver City's like redevelopment, with like a metro station being built there, and they developed a new campus just for their content. And then they're right next to Warner Media, which is HBO and HBO Max. And so, you know, they had like Ted Lasso and, you know, The Morning Show and a couple of these other, like, you know, we're gonna throw as many of these stars as we can at the screen and make it really good. But Severance is the first time that, and, you know, maybe it's because Apple is leaning in, like, no, Apple, the Apple Corporation is marketing this. And they're doing a damn good job at it because the Apple Corporation, if nothing else, is a really good marketing company.
Yeah.
The phones are whatever, right? The computers, I'll be honest, the computers have been like hitting lately, right? Like as someone who owns both a PC and a Mac, the Macs have been hitting lately. But like, the phones, whatever. The screens and the TVs, and most of it's overpriced. But the marketing, the packaging, the way you kind of like look at it is something that Apple's always been really good at. And the marketing of the show they're really doing here, but going back to like the details, the way that this episode was executed, like this is the episode, this is the red wedding, so to speak, without as much violence, right? But, like
Right.
this is the episode where you're like, oh, I'm watching a prestige TV show.
It absolutely is. And you know what? This episode was directed by Ben Stiller. All of my favorite episodes have been. He's directed quite a few of them. He's done a phenomenal job with the show, which you don't expect that I mean, and the show marries like comedy and thriller
Timing.
amazingly. Like I've seen a lot of comparisons to Get Out. I think those are pretty apt, especially with
It's like
that scene with
Office Space
Milchek.
Get Out, yeah. No, but like I think, and yeah, you don't expect it from Ben Stiller, but like I think he's taking up that like Adam McKay mantle. Of course, like they're very different styles, but of making this really subversive, really, truly leftist, right? Like
Right.
cultural commentary on workplaces in a way that, at least, I'm sure 10 years from now, especially, there will be some commentaries about how like whatever scene or whatever was like not perfect or whatever depiction, or like does Helly pass the Bechdel test? It was like whatever, right? But like I think that this is a really smart approach to doing a show. Like it's a show that has something to say, but it's
Yeah.
also not beating you over the head with it. And yeah, it is a capital TH thriller. It is really good. It's a psychological thriller. Yeah.
I
Go
saw
ahead.
a tweet that was like, I feel so weird posting about the best show I've ever seen, and all the stills look like this, and it's just like Getty images of people standing in an office, because it is exactly like that. Like the scenes that have you most taken aback, it's like just four people standing around cubicles, but it's like shit is going down. I will also say that final scene of the show when it's flipping back and forth between Innie Mark and Outie Mark on the table, they recreated that in his basement set with this giant table, which I think just goes to show like the connection between the severed floor and the, what he's been experimenting with in his basement to try to make this connection. I think that everything about this show is so thoroughly thought out, so well written. The characters have so much depth. The actors are able to play two different characters in the same body so perfectly. I just didn't expect it to be this good.
I did not expect Apple to have it in them. Honestly, I was like, this is prestige television.
Yeah.
Prestige television. I did not expect Apple to do it.
I love that they reintegrate Mark so early in this season, because I figured based on the intro, Mark was going to reintegrate. That was kind of obvious with the clues that we were given in the intro, but I figured it would be like the season finale. We're only on episode 3 and he's reintegrated. So what is next to come? I'm assuming they're going to do some sort of flashback to his first days at Lumen with Petey and the crew then.
But with some sort of like awareness of the outside.
Yes.
Kind of what, as we've been alluding to, Helly has.
Right.
But then that kind of creates an interesting thing. Like, of course, a lot of shows as of late, in the late 2010s and 2020s, and media in general, have played with this idea of multiverse theory, right? So like, is this going to be, again, is this like a full reliving in a memory, or is this the ability for Mark to change the past in some way?
Yeah.
Because it could be, I could be overthinking it, and it's just like he's able to like go back in these memories. But I think like it's kind of like what you were saying, and like what other folks I've been talking to, not on camera, I have been saying about this show is that it really entices you to want to look back at earlier episodes and look for certain details and be like,
Yeah.
okay, if Mark is going to relive this, I want to relive this. And I want to look and like, oh, I do remember when the goats first came out, like in that one episode where like Mark opens the door, he's like, oh, the goats. And basically it might as well have been Ben Stiller, like turning around in a director's chair and going, more on that later. Like breaking the fourth wall and then the rest of the scene continuing. Yeah. I know we'll eventually talk about all the other things, but you know, the cinematography is prime. I've been seeing all these behind the scenes shots of the opening shot for the season.
The work that went, they were saying that it took them almost
Months.
as long to film that scene as it took them to film the entire season. And the payoff was real because that opening sequence on the first episode of season 2 is phenomenal.
And it was so simply shot too. I mean, like I'm a little bit technical with the camera work, and at first I was just like, oh, they borrowed some people from Apple's marketing team, like the people who made the iPod commercials, and they're like, hey, yo, we need some content over here, like make it happen. And you know, probably, and it's to that, I wouldn't even say like Apple level of quality, because this is a compliment here that I hate to give this company a compliment in particular. This is HBO quality. This is not TV.
Yeah.
This is HBO quality, right? But no, it's just the monopod, like you know, a guy running behind like Adam Scott, like with a monopod, just like chasing him through these different parts of the set and following it differently, and they're able to splice the scenes together when they go off of Adam and they turn to different things as they're following kind of like the hastiness of the scene. And we'll definitely talk about it more once we do recap that episode. But like, holy hell, the way that they are like all of the stops, all of the fireworks with this show. And yeah, like you said, they're giving you this much payoff in season 3. I haven't had this feeling with a show again, kind of since maybe there's like an episode of Succession that I can't really remember off the top of my head that was like in season 2, and I was already actually no, it was an episode of Succession in season 1, episode 5, and Succession started pretty slow, if people will remember, actually, like many HBO shows do. They have to like find their footing a little bit. They're like making some dumb jokes, doing a lot of character development,
things in the pilot that there's no continuity of within the rest of the show. It had all of it.
Yeah, it's not TV, it's HBO, of course, right? This feels like Ben Stiller manufactured the puzzle set, and the first episode he just dumped all the pieces out. Like, there's a way this exactly all fits together, but I'm just gonna make you figure out, okay, you got to start with the corner pieces and the edges to figure out, like, okay, what are the boundaries of this, and then you have to dig in deeper, and it gets confusing. So yeah, like,
yeah. I'll just say things that we've learned in this season, that there was a payoff in this episode, even so far. The first episode, when Milchek shows the fake newspaper that they created to make the innies think that they were famous on the outside, features a line where it talks about how Rickon wrote a new book specifically for innies about praising Keir and things like that. And then in this episode, we see Natalie at Rickon and Devon's house trying to get Rickon to write the We Are specifically for innies. So I mean, even from episode 1 to episode 3, nothing is an accident. You have to pause the screen to read that newspaper to read into that, but then that minute detail comes into play in this episode. You know, there's just so many little things that it's like they're playing the long game in that writer's room. Or they're like, one thing I'll just say as a soccer fan, there's a bunch of characters that are named after Arsenal players. Like the state senator's name is Arteta, who's the manager of Arsenal. His 2 sons are Kai, it's Kai and Declan, who are 2 Arsenal players, and then the guy that Dylan G interviews with at Great Doors, his name is Mr. Saliba. Saliba is a center back for Arsenal. Just like even little things like that it's like, it's cute. I don't know. I love it.
This is one that's like Again, this is usually a music podcast, so for the people watching on that stream, like we've described MF Doom as like the rapper's rapper, where like people who are really good at rapping, they'll go, oh no, I understand that I'm respected for this thing I do, but my favorite rapper is actually this guy. Like it's a really obscure Jamiroquai or Nardwar is like a music journalist's favorite music journalist, because they're like, okay, I understand, I'm good and I get some interviews here there, but like Nardwar is amazing. Like if you're if you're in court and you have to like argue against Nardwar, you're losing. Like plead, like just give up. That man is the FBI and the CIA.
Before we wrap up, I want to go back to a comment that Zero left about the elevator that goes down to the testing floor, and what we noticed that Miss Casey, aka Gemma, went back down there. One thing that I noticed when Dylan was scrolling to look for the overtime contingency to activate it, he scrolls past something called Lullaby. There's a bunch of different settings there that he has to scroll past before he gets to the overtime contingency.
I remember that.
I think that that's a hint as to the status of the individuals on the testing floor, that they're put in this lullaby status, which is like a coma, essentially. They're just asleep. They don't have an outie. They don't get to go to the surface. They don't get to go to the outside world. They're just put to sleep during the times that they're not being activated for. Maybe I'm completely off base there, but
that makes sense for the 12-year-old, maybe.
Right. She also, which
I hope.
I think it's interesting because the innies, we can think of them as like 2-year-olds, right? We know that Mark's been there for 2 years. He's essentially a 2-year-old. He has a lot of knowledge that's not personal, but his experience on Earth as he knows it has only existed for a portion of 40 hours a week for 2 years. Versus her, who seems like,
let's be real, they work them like slaves up at Lumen. Happy Black History Month. So like it's definitely more than 40 hours a week.
Definitely more than 40 hours. But
you see sorry, just really fast, like, because it's a detail. You see, and I'm sure it'll be an important one, but you see there's like a montage, I think maybe in the second episode. Actually, honestly, I think it's in the first of the season, where Mark is clocking in and clocking out and basically he's running them 10 bangers, them 12 bangers. Like he's doing long days.
Yes.
Sorry to cut you off, but continue.
No, it's fine. I was just gonna say, but like if you think about Miss Wong, like, yeah, she's 12 or 14 or however old she's supposed to be, but she might theoretically be older than them. She might be older than them if she's existed in this world longer than they have. If she's always been an innie at Lumen, theoretically, she might have more worldly experiences than they do, which I think is a fascinating way to think about it. But
you ever been at a company where a person younger than you is your boss?
Yeah, it's weird. It's weird.
It's like, I think even that's another one of those, like, Severance is an allegory for the workplace, of course, obviously, but that's definitely another one of those pieces where like even Milchick's a little bit like I can easily see a point where like the little 12-year-old or whatever replaces Natalie.
Right.
And is speaking for the board. That's when Milchick becomes the Joker.
Right.
Now quote me later. This is God's show, honestly, and I needed this, especially. There's a saying we've had on Audio Face because we started the show in 2017, May 2017. So during the first Trump administration, the world is terrible, but the music is great. And I think like throughout history, you've seen a renaissance of like good content and good media that is reflective of really bad times. The worse the times get, and naturally, Severance and this season was not planned for a particular administration. I don't think it really has much to say about politics and doesn't really need to. But I think this is a way to say, like, in late stage capitalism, this is the white collar dystopia. Yeah. And, it's definitely, I say that pretty particularly because there's we are coming up right now. It's early February. We're near an anniversary of the East Palestine, Ohio tragedy. And so there's definitely a lot of blue collar dystopia happening around the country and around the world too. But I think for a show to illustrate this so well and so like perfectly is like chef's ass kiss.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
So yeah, I think we're still figuring this out, Ray and I, but I think we'll probably come back on Sundays kind of like this at some time on the weekends and recap. I'm gonna have to start watching the show on Thursday evenings now. Now it's gonna be like New Music Fridays, but it's gonna be Severance Thursdays
Severance
for me.
Thursday.
Yes. Which is gonna be hilarious because like there's definitely gonna be times where like we're doing Power Report and you get the advantage because you'll be signing off early for work. And actually I'll be hosting the last hour
And I'll be
while,
in the shower watching Severance on my phone.
yes, that lucky you, let's say. But either way, we will be going through that, and then once the season ends and we're able to like digest that, I think we'll have some. I mean, it's Apple. And it's Apple in the sense that they will take time on their products, but it's not Apple in the sense that we're going to get a new one of these every single year.
Right. No, it's going to be a while. It was 3 years between the first and the second season. So we have plenty of time to dissect what happened
in season 1, and plenty of time to perhaps like invite on guests. Wouldn't that be awesome if we start getting like cast stars and stuff like that?
The thing was, you mentioned about followers. Like I was on Twitter looking up some of the cast members, like Tramel Tillman. He has less followers than me, and I'm not famous, and I'm not in a fucking famous TV show. So I was like, maybe this is how we get to talk to, you know, Britt Lauer or Tramel Tillman. Christopher Walken. No, I'm just kidding. He doesn't even own a phone, so
it's definitely one of my favorite, and we'll mention this a lot too, I'm sure. But the fact that they just mail him DVDs.
It's so funny. They literally produce DVDs only so that he can watch the show. They love them.
They have a one of those like candy colored Apple computers from the 2000s that burns discs. That they keep running just for Christopher Walken to watch Severance when it's done.
Literally.
the little like skeuomorphic iTunes logo bouncing in the corner of the screen. Like bum Apple. Okay. This has been Audio Face. This version of Audio Face, mysterious and important podcast about Severance.
Mysterious and important. Praise Kier.
Yes. We also gotta say that Kabelvig can sing the fuck out of Kier Wonderful Kier, that Praise Kier song. Like, fuck,
she
dude.
killed it.
Like,
she killed it.
That is incredible. Yes. Oh darn. Cosmopolitics just rated. Thank you, Christina.
Thank you. Sorry, we're wrapping up.
Yeah, sorry. People in chat, definitely let me know where I should keep the raid energy going, and I'll stay on for a little bit longer. But yeah, we had just reviewed, definitely watch the replay here or on YouTube or on Rayyvana's Twitch or wherever you're watching this, frankly. And yeah, we rewatched Severance. And we will be continuing to rewatch Severance because damn, this is cinema. This is content. I mean, we needed some content right now, and this is content. Otherwise, Ray and I can be found screaming about politics on Power Report occasionally on Thursdays. And yeah, is there anything else you got going on?
Nope, that's it. Literally, that's it. I'm studying for an important licensing exam right now, so my free time is limited. But otherwise, you can follow me on Twitter where I'm talking about how stupid the world is. And I will be cutting this into TikToks. So you can follow me on TikTok. It's just Rayyvana on there. And I will also probably be doing some of my own theorizing on there with the Severance fan base that has found a home on that app. So if you also I'm posting memes about Severance on Instagram on my stories. So if you follow me on there, you'll find some some Severance jokes.
That's good. That's good. Yeah, similarly, I can be found on Twitter, Dan from the Web, Twitch, Dan from the Web, naturally. Blue Sky, Dan from the Inter.net. I'm a lot more on there. Blue Sky is very nice.
It is.
Fewer Nazis and just yeah, in general. I did not see you there. Anyways, I will end it sort of here, but I will also figure out who to raid on Twitch just based on like who is coming up on my screen. And yeah, I don't have an outro for this. We'll come up with something cool or whatever. But yes, we'll do that. Anyways,
Okay.
take care, y'all. Have a good week. And we'll see you next week. Cheers. Okay. As far as Twitch goes, I am going to raid. Raid. Let me see who is like I'm following, who is live on Twitch right now, other than Ray. You know what? Questions? That's a shame. Yeah. I think I'm going to just go with I wish I saw you live, Christina. Sorry. Also, folks can check out Rayyvana's recent episode on Movie Night Extravaganza with Christina. So that's a good thing. That's a real thing. But yeah, no, everyone's offline right now, which makes sense. People have lives. That's good. People should continue to have lives. I'm gonna rate one of my friends. He is Squishmallow says Maple Takes. We'll do that. Let me get that set up, but thank you very much. Let's get it on. Okay, so if you're on Twitch, it's Maple Takes. Otherwise, if you're on YouTube or watching anywhere else, it's twitch.tv/Maple Takes, all one word, maple like the leaf. And we're running that. So again, thank you very much. And powers in you. Well, I would usually say the power is always within you, but this is not Power Report. So let's go. Hey ho. Bada bing.